Hello, everyone. This is Marita, one who catches lightning, with the Path of Ish podcast, Walking with Our Shadow, where we share ancient indigenous teachings of remembrance, all so we can walk and learn how to walk a path of radical self-love. It is with gratitude, grace, and thanksgiving that we come to the circle today. And we have a special treat. Today, we will be sitting and speaking to Grandmother Láné Saán Moonwalker. Welcome, Grandmother.
Thank you ever so much, my dear, delightful friend, ally, student, teacher in your own right, healer in your own right, oracle, exceptionally talented there as well. Why I work with you as the official apprentice that is learning the Moonwalker ways. I am so deeply humbled that you have requested me to share some time with you. One of your many beautiful projects. Thank you, Marita.
Thank you, Grandmother. It's an honor always to have conversations. And before we get on to one of our conversations that you and I like to take our time with, I'd love in your own words to tell people what your creation story is. How are you feeling right now in this time and place? A story that will allow people to meet you now.
In this moment now, my creation story means that I have just come in from the pastures and the barn. I have two wonderful horses, and I made sure that they got fed. I also have made sure that the dogs, the cats, and myself and my assistant here, I have a human assistant to handle some of the computer apparatus to help me out there. We've all been fed. And that's a good thing because feeding, nurturance, shared tears and laughter of losses and gains is not only a part of my creation story right at this very moment, but it's a part of my family creation story. It is a part of my tribal lineages, both the Jewish side, which you are aware of, and the native Yoeme Inde side, which you're also aware of, Marita. And both of these lineages have a tremendous amount of how important it is as community to share over food and our stories, those that are about how we came into the world as a tribal base, but also how we came into the world personally, take it really personally when mom and dad got together and created oneself, and take it personally, how did I get to be sitting here after making sure everybody got fed and nurtured on property? Even the little bunny that I had left some extra goodies from the horses out in my garden, and how it was eating as I came over here to do this with you. So that's my creation story. That's how I'm sitting with you now.
Thank you, Grandmother. You know, as you're telling your creation story, you're telling it in a very indigenous way, of course. Other people would have taken the time to speak of their titles and what they had accomplished and their position. And I think this is such a beautiful example of what it means to walk in an indigenous way in this alternative reality, and how no matter what titles you are or positions, that you are always working, being, and feeding. And that brings us to kind of the conversation we're going to have today, which is this concept about how one in this day and age can become what you and I like to call an instant shaman.
Yes, that was in one of our very deep conversations and deep concerns where I understand people being called by Mother Earth because they apparently weren't hearing well enough after having their minds and their hearts and their bodies colonized. They weren't able to hear the soft, gentle murmurings that Earth Mother, our beloved shared mother below our feet, is always giving to us about proper, relationship, good relationship with her, good relationship with our Sun Father, good relationship with Onahe, our grandmother moon, good relationship with her heart of hearts and everything around us, including our fellow travelers that are two-legged and four-legged and winged, and even those that we may not like little tiny wings and bite us. So the no-see-ums. And we've always heard this from her, but the greater populace that has lost track of that ability to communicate with her, to hear her, are now waking up to it. And it's because she's screaming. That's why. And she's really speaking loudly. It's a lot harder to ignore that there is global climate change at this point than when we were hearing this back in the 30s and 40s and 50s of the last century, and definitely by the 60s in the last century. We were even ignoring it in the 70s and 80s, and I was like, what? But it means that in that rush to get to a place of returning back to our beginnings, all peoples are her children. All two-leggeds are her children. And that means all of us, sometimes deeper buried in our bones, in our genetic codes, is the ability to have sacred communion, conversation with her, our shared mother, with all of her progeny, whether they are a rock or a shell or a little bird or a big buffalo heading for you because you have just gotten a little too close to them. So, in that rush, humanity, I'm going to include myself here, even though this is not my way or preference. We have started taking some pretty serious shortcuts. And one of those shortcuts is for us to perceive that we are an apprentice or an official apprentice. And I made a point about the nature of our relationship because every time for us, from a more indigenous way, we add on a little tag on to a title. Oh, I'm studying with grandmother. Oh, I am a general student. I listen to grandfather, but I'm not really his personal student. Well, you become a personal student, you become being mentored by that teacher, that elder, you become an apprentice, and then you become an official apprentice. All of these are adaptations we've had to do over the ages as we've learned about people who've been colonized. And I really look at it as a form of brainwashing, that colonization. And that happened long ago. And if you know anything about history, there is not one continent that has hosted one or many civilizations that do this colonizing, conquering process to others. You know, we're not going to have a history lesson, but you can look up in history about high civilizations, and every single continent except the Arctic has done this. And of course, the Antarctic, it's mostly penguins living there naturally. So the penguins don't do this. Thank goodness. Thank Earth Mother. Much better design than this overthinking monkey that the two-leggeds are. In this rush to remember, remember when we were in deep, beloved communion with her, we have been taking some very serious shortcuts. And those shortcuts that we have been taking gives us the presumption to think that we know what we're doing. When you don't grow up with that head heart space, you have to understand it takes years. We don't start this way when we first come out of the chute. No, we are little stinky, smelly, burping, farting, pooping monkeys that our parents have to clean up after for quite some time. Takes us a while to learn language. Takes us a while how to be with other people, like at the table, and to have some form of understanding. And that's the piece here. It takes years for that. Then it takes more years to have a deeper understanding of why your grandmother already knew you were going to get there long before we had cell phones. The whole room is set up. Everyone from the whole family is there to greet you. You're guided to go and shake hands, introduce yourself to your uncle, to your cousin you've never met before, to this aunt that you have met before and has come and visited you before, to this personage here. And they explain to you hello and what their relationship and their understanding. You learn as you go along. You have to be there when your grandfather goes out to the garden and is not just watering it. Oh no, talking, stroking to every single one of his precious herbs that he has planted so that everyone in the household will be healthy. And then if you are precocious, I was precocious, and you ask if you can help out, you get to go out and you gather up the tools and you treat the tools with sacredness and you go and you talk with the trees as you gather the peaches. Or if on that day it's cherries or apples, that you respect that orchard that he planted with his love, his laughter, his tears when there has been a loss, with every single one of those trees. So his family is fed. And so that his wife will have all the resources she needs to keep everybody healthy, those are the herbs, and to keep everybody fed. So when you're learning later, you have to do things to make up for that time you lost. That's just about how to be human. That's it. That's all you're learning, how to be human and how to be a good human who walks on our beloved mother below our feet with gentleness, who stands in his light with humility, not doing some kind of Icarus story, and being rocked in the gentle movement of Onahe, our beloved grandmother moon. So to think that you can become, quote, a shaman, which I'm putting that in quote because shaman is actually a term that comes out of Siberia from those people there, which are part of Russia, modern language, Russia and Mongolia, and even parts of Northern Korea, just outside of their borders there. That's from their term, from their elders who are wisdom keepers. So even this, I'm appropriating and borrowing a term, shaman, because that's not what we called ours. Ours are the wisdom keepers. They are the guardians of knowledge and wisdom. Wisdom being more than knowledge. Well, as you're learning how to be a human, things happen along the way and you demonstrate talent, but it's not instant. You don't demonstrate talent at the age of 5 or 7 or 13 or whatever it happens to be in your particular case, where you demonstrate this greater ability and wisdom and pulling and hearing your ancestors who reside on the ethereal planes. They wait, they watch you, they give you tests. By the time you are a young woman or a young man, you have been tested over and over and over again before ever grandma or your tia say, venga, venga, hija, come with me, my child, because they want to show you, because you've demonstrated this. So this is a long, engaged process. Then, if you're lucky and you've demonstrated and you are so moved, and that happens in being invited into those ceremonies because of your passing your tests and being put in a position where you have more responsibility in that ceremony, then if you are fortunate and called to it, and you and the elder both hear from the elders on the other side, the plants, the animals, the rocks, all the beingnesses, the water, of course, the wind, the air, the land itself, that you are to work with a specific type of medicine, something that has the power to heal people. And this can be done through ceremony and plants and animal knowledge and minerals, fire, all sorts of different kinds of activities with this. Then you are trained, and you can spend, well, I can only speak for myself. Now, I was an official apprentice. That was, quote, 17 years. Now, you might get it done in less and you might get it done in more, but it's understood it's going to take this many winters for you to get through this. If you're not in that high level of a responsibility, that's what that high is referring to, responsibility. If you are being trained to be a storyteller, perhaps, or a singer or drummer for ceremony, it might take 3 to 5 years, maybe, depending on all of the responsibilities with it. I've heard and understand it can be 7, 8, 9. And if you don't get it done in that 7 years, well, then it's for you 8 or 9 years or whatever it turns out. And that's the norm. It's frightening to me how we got to that conversation, as you know, was some comments I made about how I find it frightening that people can get online and be qualified to distribute what I consider very shake you up, wake you up kinds of medicinas, such as ayahuasca, that they can do that and have a licensure to distribute that in anything less than 7 years, let alone a few weeks. And I used to be horrified when I heard about, I heard this from someone who's a student, a casual student, not a serious student, who sits in private conversation and works through stuff with me and doesn't always hear what they want to hear in those conversations. This was a casual student, just showed up at some events, and they knew that this is the work they were supposed to do. We had talked about that after one of the meetings. And now they were signed up in a class, and she was going to be an ordained shaman. She spent 2 years, once a month, going for a weekend to a place in California. Now, to me, in my head, I'm going, that would be 100, let's see, how many weeks? Once a month. So that's 24 weekends. Now, how many hours? So I'm calibrating in my head. and asking her, well, what does that look like? Is that just Saturday, Sunday? Oh, no, that's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then we have a closing ceremony on Monday morning. So in my head, I'm calculating how many hundreds of hours. And I'm worried because traditionally, it should be beyond the capacity to calculate the number of hours of training to become a guardian of a wisdom, let alone one that can cause a huge wake up. Some of us need huge wake ups sometimes, or potential death if we have not been working with a practitioner who knows what they're doing. That's how we came up with the term instant shaman, because I was like, oh, this is a little scary, isn't it? Anyway, yeah, instant shaman. That's the world we're living in today's world. And it's deeply concerning to all the elders I've spoken to, all of my friends and allies that are also elders and like yourself, who were raised relatively traditionally and studied with traditional elders. It's of deep concern.
Grandmother, many people listening to us, right, might say, well, then I'll never catch up and be able to be one. And I find that really curious because I almost feel that people, when you hear the call of Mother Earth, it's not an audition or a job call. There's not like, you're not sending in your resume, getting hired as the CEO immediately, right?
Right.
Yet many people I feel are treating it this way. And, in Western ways, it's just, like, what am I going to do? What's going to be my side hustle? What's going to be my next job? And so they treat it that way. And so they always want to be experts. And what I'm finding greatly disturbing, and not just disturbing, but harmful in so many ways, are people who position themselves as experts who have little or no training and who do not continue to have teachers. They're like, oh, I'm done. I learned. I learned or I didn't learn. And so now I'm going to go and I'm going to be the expert of whatever, right? And so I kind of want to talk about the depth and the beauty of what it means to be responsible as a lifelong student, to as a teacher, to have a teacher, you know? And I think people don't see it that way in the West.
I would
And
agree. Here's another scary thing. Having worked with quite a number of nurses and doctors, what are their instructions when they graduate? Well, they do their internship. And during their internship, and then afterwards, if you don't know what you're doing, fake it. Just fake it. I'm like, oh my gosh. For us, our instruction is, well, if you run into a problem, be very honest with your person. They're going to know whether you're lying or not. Don't underestimate their intelligence. Be honest with them. Let me check with my teacher. Let me check with one of my elders. It's simple, it's easy. It takes some humility. That's what's important. When I was first given permission to start doing some really basic energy work through massage and energy balancing hand work, of course, I'd been studying with elders, and my grandmother, who was a practitioner, who still was seeing people in her late 80s. In my head and mind, I'm like, what am I doing? And what I was told and was shared with me by my father in this particular case was, just be honest where you are at. This is what I can do. This is what I have permission to do. In fact, I've been given permission and told, go practice. Find a few of your friends and a few of their friends who will let you work with them. But don't go past this point. If you reach to that and you know that they need more help than what you can do, refer them to someone who's more experienced. Oh, that's so easy. Relatively speaking. It takes some humility and honesty. You have to be authentic with yourself, brutally honest with yourself. Then you can be honest with someone else. That's way easier after you've been that honest with yourself. Oh, I assure you, for many years after that, I was like, there's something going on here that I do not have the knowledge of how to handle it, but I think you need to see a doctor. I think you need to see an herbalist. May I recommend this person? She knows a lot more about energy work with the human body or the human psyche or the emotions. You learn to be much more honest. And then, if you are generous and honest in that way with all that you work with, in return, that which you work with will also be honest and generous with you, whether they're a two-legged or the tree that has given you part of its beingness in order to make a tool that you're using, or those herbs that you gathered in order to create an oil that is appropriate for you to be using for that person. All of those things, they will be generous with you, and so will your people that you work with, or your dogs, or horses, or whatever creature you are working with. Or sometimes, if you're doing your healing work with an environment, the trees, the nature itself, they will be generous with you. Just take your time, be quiet, put your prayers forward, and listen. This is the peace. I would agree with you that's also missing, Marita, in this perception, this very colonized, brainwashed perception that you have to know everything. No, we don't know everything, and we will never know everything. Every single one of us, from the moment we are conceived until we are born, until we grow up, until we mature, and until we get old and die, are a student, always learning. I think one of the most powerful lessons I ever had from my mentor and teacher, to Moonwalker, and she was dying. That was, you're expected. If you're the official apprentice, you're there all the way through thick and thin, tears of laughter and losses, both. Tears and laughter, both. Gains and losses, both. You're there for the whole thing, even when it's not nice and pleasant to get through. So, as the official apprentice with her, of course, I'm there as she is dying, with all the stuff that comes with it. If anyone has been witness to anyone dying, whether it's a dog or a human, it's messy, always. Anyway, as she was dying and she was breathing through it, saying her very conscious, loving goodbyes to her friends and allies. That included two-leggeds and four-leggeds, and a few places. She stepped outside for a bit to say goodbye to Mama, Mama below our feet. And there was one other person there, me and one other person at this point. She sighed, took a deep breath, and she said, I'm a little scared. I've never done this before. I've helped others through this door, but there's a part of me, as much as I know, and speak to my father and grandmother from the other side. It's a little scary. I have never done this before. Well, if that doesn't embody what you and I are talking about, that we are always, always a student, and the level of humility of this person who was, without question, a master in so many ways in her wisdom and knowledge, and the breadth of it, was able with humility to say she was scared. She'd never done this before. Very powerful. We're always learning. It's just how it is. Welcome to being human.
Yes, such a powerful story, made me a little teary. And I think it talks about the vulnerability that it takes to be someone who is conscious and responsible for the lessons that they're learning, whether they like them or not. But the vulnerability that it takes to meet yourself, even in fear or in loss, and not use it as a tactic, a marketing tactic, to then show your expertise. And that's what we are up against, grandmother. We are in a place where you are not allowed to be human. You can only be an expert, and where you must be bigger than the medicine.
Mm. And where your identity, your right to be, comes from being that expert,
Yeah.
which that's opposite of how we perceive our world, our paradigm, and cosmology. Our right to be does not come from being an expert, does not come from knowing how to drive a car, how to do a particular job, or to be a certain kind of artist, a singer or dancer. It comes by merely being an aspect and expression, gifted life by sacred, divine, male, female, grandmother energies. And I'm not talking about mom and pop here, I'm talking about the bigger mother, father, grandmother, and child within us. That's where our right to be comes from. And sometimes I'm a mess. And sometimes I'm happy and joyous and singing. And sometimes I'm in fear and anger. And even those emotions are not my right to be. They're just something I get to experience because I've been given this opportunity to be in a human suit. Not even taking the human suit so personally.
Grandmother, as we're talking about this right to be that is outside again, kind of full circle of having influence, one of the things that we have been speaking of, if people are actually listening, not just hearing, is the gift that it is that comes from working diligently to earn the medicine.
Mm,
And I don't think, the Western world sees it and they don't think it's beautiful. They want something fast and they want something full of ease because they've been told if something is full of ease, then it's right, right? And that's colonization.
mm.
I was
And we're
listening.
back at instant.
Exactly. We're back at instant. I was.
We have instant coffee, we have instant ramen. Why
Yep.
not instant shaman?
And pretty soon you can probably get it all at a vending machine.
Absolutely.
I was listening to another elder before this, grandmother, Moonhawk. It was a tape that he's passed already, and he's of the Hopi tradition. And he was talking about how the Hopi people decided to live where they live. Why live in a desert? And he said, because it makes you pray for rain. And that struck me, right? He said, if things were so easy, right, then we wouldn't have to go to the grandmothers and the grandfathers and ask for rain. And then we would forget them. And so there was this, in this dialogue, again, that there must be kind of a yearning to learn, a yearning for
And
learning.
earning,
Yes.
that those two work together. You must long for it. You must yearn for it. Is that not part of the nature of true love?
Yeah.
Is the yearning, the desire. And then the earning is the follow up with action. And I've had some people, students, some casual in the sense, not to take away from this, but they show up at some of my talks or some of my classes or some of the ceremonies I provide, and they aren't this ongoing, regular, consistent, deep unpacking conversation and getting into the real nooks and crannies of what's going on. And so these students, I've had this, and I've had this from some people who've approached and actually are sitting in front of me in regard to my term that comes up over and over and over again. It's earned. You haven't earned that yet. How come I can't learn that? You haven't earned it yet. And what does that mean? Why do I have to earn it? Well, it's really simple. I need to see, not just hear, but see in action and observe you and then feel from you, thus having an major sensory system experience of you demonstrating to me that you are clueful and understand at least a part of what this wisdom is. And I don't care if it's herbs or rocks and shells or feathers or song, but demonstrate to me that you can be in deep communion with that other being, have a sacred relationship with that other being, both sentient and non sentient. Then to me, you will have shown that you have understood this much and thus earned being able to go deeper in your relationship with those beings, those kinds of herbs, those kinds of rocks, those kinds of shells, those kinds of feathers. That's what earning is. And that is absolutely no different than Earth Mother teaches us, is it? We earn permission to walk. We can't just have that in our head as a nice idea. Here, you're granted. Now you know the mechanics of walking. I've shown you how to do it. Now go to it, baby. No, that baby has to fall down a lot of times to learn their balance. They have to do a lot of leaning on mom, dad, older sister, brother, table to earn the ability to walk. That's what it is to earn. And that's why we give so much time to our elders, even if that elder is not yet gray haired. We will acknowledge, as you know, an elder if they have demonstrated that deeper understanding long before they are 70, my age. That's the piece here that they have to understand. You said something about, oh, I will never have enough time. Well, if you're open, receptive, and doing the work,
Mhm.
who knows? If it's an area of talent, you will have time. But don't think that you're going to be the greatest shaman that has ever walked the earth. You're in heavy company if you're thinking that. I would not presume that. Let's put it that way. Okay. I'm not going to even try walking on water.
So, you and I have also discussed a little bit about as people kind of start to explore indigenous ways, how uncomfortable it can be because of the deprogramming of colonization.
Mm.
And my question then is, how do those people who are seeking something, right? Seeking the medicine that cannot be found in their communities because they're colonized, deal with the fear of their families when they're like, oh, they're going that way, because, that worry, that fear for them, how does that person who is seeking and wanting to step into something so different, how can they, find the beauty of that pressure point? Because as you and I know, there is a beauty in that pressure point. There has to be an amount of pressure for change. And we know humans do not like change. And so, in your own words, grandmother, what is your advice to those people who are like, I want to, but I don't. And now my family's worried,
Oh, I love your little lightweight questions here, Marita.
I told you.
Well, this is why you get to be in the relationship with me that you are, of being more than just an average brave and bravette
Mhm.
student. So, first and foremost, let's go back to the story of the Hopi elder and why does one live in the desert? And it speaks deeply to me because, as you know, I live in the desert myself. It is not the same desert that the Hopi live in, which is the Sonoran Desert. I live in the neighboring desert, the Chihuahuan Desert. Okay. Because the life in the desert demands that we hold close our relationship with the elementals and remember that we must pray and be in good relationship with the spirit beings, the elementals, the water, the rain, the Avanyu, all of the sacred beings, so that there will be rain. It's the exact same process when we have resistance from friends and family. What that means is that because we know they're going to be going through stuff, and I assure you, when your teacher, if you have a real teacher, that teacher's job is to make you freak out enough to take a moment to look at the false story you're telling yourself. And sometimes that means getting really close to death in order to jostle that brainwashing in there. That's a given. One needs to foster and nurture the yearning beyond that teacher, beyond your mom, beyond your best friend. You have to foster and nurture your desire for deep communion with the sacred divine energies that move all, whether they are moving through a tree in the wind or the heartbeat of mother below our feet or your little dog who knows you're all freaked out, who comes up and gives you a big sloppy kiss to let you know it's okay, you're going to get through this. We have to foster that part inside of us, why we started this journey. And we have to look at those beloveds of our journey up to that point, that they're going to be pushing every single button in ways that your teacher will not be able to push, but your friends, family will push those buttons that are keys into how you have been brainwashed. And we think that we're not brainwashed. I tell even my indigenous students, unless they are from certain parts of the world, if you grow up in a second or third world nation, you've had some colonized brainwashing. Hate to tell you this, but it's true. that you have to undo some of that because we take personally as children how to fit in enough to not be taken out by the dominant culture because we're too different. So I do have a sit down deep chat with these people that it is going to be a threat to their belief systems and belief systems that they don't even know they have. Shattering the internal paradigm, which is how one perceives the world through that colonized belief system, is painful. So get a grip. This is what you are proposing for your life journey, and you better make a commitment to yourself that you will do absolutely everything that you can and your absolute best to become a true student of Ome, our beloved mother below our feet, Shehuelo, our beloved Father that lights the day, and Onahe, who lights the night. And get ready for the ride. Because while they're freaking out, guess what? It's going to be causing you to go through fear, anger, grief, sometimes love and joy, but every emotion you could imagine. And you're going to revisit every single trauma of your childhood. And you're going to have to face those lies that you bought and the ones that you willingly agreed to because they fit in with what you thought you really wanted without realizing that that was an illusion. That's a painful journey. And yeah, you will go through culture shock. So be prepared. That's what I tell them. And I also tell them this because I have some people who come to me and they say, I'm looking for a teacher. I don't know if it's you or not. And I said, I don't either. That's my first answer. And they're startled by that because sometimes I don't know yet. I don't know. I don't have all the answers. I'm also learning here. So, anyway, what I explain to them is if your teacher and the system that you're learning, whether it's Dogon from Africa or that of the Maori people of New Zealand, or what I happen to be teaching of the Sonoran Desert peoples, the desert peoples of Turtle Island, then that teacher and that system better be scaring the dickens out of you and forcing you to look at this stuff and putting you in uncomfortable positions. Now, it should be a good balance that if they are a good teacher, they will also make sure you have regroup time to process what did I experience, what did I learn, how will I be different, and stick with the discipline. That discipline that they give you, there's a reason for it. It is to force you to address the truth within you. You cannot be authentic for other if you can't be authentic for yourself. And this gets us back to medicina, because if we're relying on that plant medicina to do it all, oh, I've took my 2-week course online. I'm a shaman. I can distribute this. And no, the training is for us that you learn how to get that person close enough to death to scare out of them the lies and ghosts of the brainwashing that they've done to themselves and others, and a culture has done to them. A conquering culture has done to them. Then things can change. But you have to stick with a teacher and a discipline that's going to put you in those uncomfortable places. And I tell them, otherwise, if they're not doing that, they're not doing their job. They're giving you a popsicle and telling you, good, you'll be better tomorrow. Wake up tomorrow. They're like the doctor, Lucy in Schultz's Charlie Brown. Here, take this candy, you'll be better in the morning. No. I tell them that. I said, "You're not always gonna be happy with me. You better love the system you pick and the discipline you pick and the teacher you are working with enough, and trust your commitment to you in this moment now to see you through those times where you experience a set of those lies, those ghosts of you or your ancestors being shattered and broken. It's part of the journey. That's why it takes so long. That's why it's not 2 weeks. If I start the journey at 15, then I've got 15 years of crap to deal with, plus 9 months in utero, plus whatever set my parents up to be in that relationship, and then their parents and their parents. Just, if I'm just your average brave and bravette, well, that's a good 7 generations worth of stuff. And if I happen to be from a Jewish or Japanese family, then it's automatically 10 generations. You're welcome very much. And if I happen to have had an aunt who is a mother superior, well, that's 9 generations. Okay, welcome to being human. It's not an overnight deal. And that's why it's from conception, birth, growth, maturation, old age, and death that we are students. Always.
Mm. As you say that, and as we're, close to closing this conversation, it just comes to my mind that no wonder it was said that the shamans, and this was from, of course, the West, observing shamans, quote unquote shamans in indigenous places, were said to be mad. And it's because they broke through illusions and they didn't present to these, ethnographers and anthropologists as sane beings or someone who fits into their system. Would you agree, grandmother?
I would agree. And anyone who can hear rocks and trees and what's carried and see what's carried in the different colors of the wind would be considered insane by this colonized culture base. And when I say that, I want to be very clear. I'm not just talking about what comes out of Europe. Oh, the Chinese are pretty amazing at their brainwashing. Let's get a grip here.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have all of the Abrahamic lineage throughout the Middle East, and that's several forms of brainwashing going on there. And we can go on and on and on there. As I said, there are conquerors from all around the world, and it's not just on Europe. Europe has the story of what happened when the Holy Roman Empire and the Roman Empire really did a number on them. But I assure you, on the other side of the globe, the Chinese, and now we're going to have to throw in the Koreans, the Japanese, and the Mongolians, all of whom have had their own forms of colonization and style of conquering. So it's just, this is part of what the paradigm shattering has to include is to
Yeah.
understand, oh, this is just the human journey.
Mm-hmm.
Do not take this personally. This is just the human journey. And I am just one of them in the midst of learning my lessons about the human journey on this particular go round. But, our people, as you know, we've talked about this, you come from a neighboring tribe. We also are aware that this is not the only life experience we get. We get quite a number of them. And I sometimes, in my own little way, kind of feel like maybe that's because we're such obstinate children.
Well, grandmother, thank you for your words that are flowering in the desert right now and helping us remember that when we hit that rock bottom, it's a good thing because finally we can listen to the stone people, as Olme told me one day. So thank you, Grandmother, for this time, and I look forward to having another conversation with you soon. To all of your teachers, and thank you for being my teacher, and to all your people, Shide.
And thank you ever so much, Marita. This has been way more fun than I was expecting and much easier. So, this is my first podcast and new learning experience for me also. Thank you to all of the beings that have enabled you to spend this time with me and with all of your other guests. And thank you to your ancestors and theirs before them, and all the spirits in the ethereal realms who are of good heart, who've helped guide us to this moment now. Shade.
Shide. Once again, it is with deepest gratitude that I bow to you for joining me on this podcast, this episode, this circle, this plática, this meditation, this remembering. I hope that you have stayed curious. I hope to see you in the circle again next week. So make sure that you like or follow. Until then, may you be blessed with abundance of peace and radical self-love.